Happy New Year, everyone! I love to have you back here on my channel. If you happen to be new, my name is Stefani and I make videos on topic of language learning, as I absolutely love learning languages and I have learned quite a few at this point, so this channel is dedicated all about languages and sharing tips on how best to learn them. In this video, I'm going to tell you how to become a polyglot, in my opinion. Of course, there's many ways to become one, but I'm going to be as comprehensive as possible. I'm going to try to make sure that it includes as many tips and tricks as possible. And I feel like, when it's the start of a new year, regardless whether you are or are not a resolution person, still it kind of helps to utilize this kind of buzzing, fresh energy to dive into some of those goals. So let's get started. First of all, let me start by saying you don't need to want to become a polyglot. I have people that watch my channel that I know that they are simply interested in learning like 1 or 2 languages in addition to their native one, and that's it. So it's not really about, my channel is not completely dedicated to just simply people that want to be polyglots. It's really anybody that's interested in learning a little bit more about how to pick up languages, whether that's just 1 language or 20. So what I want to do with this video is, first of all, say that you don't need to want to become a polyglot. That's definitely not a goal that everybody should have, right? And this video is for the people that, have decided that this is what they want, that this is what they're interested in, and are asking themselves the question, okay, but how do I actually become one? So if you're that person, then keep watching. And if you're not, I think that there's some useful advice in this video that's going to help you in general about just learning 1 more language. Obviously, there's many benefits to being a polyglot, but I'm not going to cover that in this video. This deserves a whole other video by itself, discussing, some of the pros and cons of being a polyglot. There's mostly pros, but sometimes when you're hunting for a word in your head, Anyways, let's just get started. So real quickly, my story of how I became a polyglot was I kind of didn't intend to become one. I just sort of started picking up languages. I studied a couple at school, but then I really wanted to study Spanish, which wasn't offered in my school. So that's kind of the whole thing, the way it started for me. And I've told this story in another video. I'm going to pop it on the screen if you want to know more about my story and how I started with languages. But what I want to point out here is that I never really intended to become a polyglot. It kind of came out of a love for the Spanish language and then love for other languages. And it just sort of kind of snowballed into this thing where I just kept doing what I wanted to do without really thinking about the destination. So if you already are thinking about the destination, at least you can, research some advice such as this video, and then you can see what you can do so that you know that you're not wasting a bunch of time just doing things that don't work the way that I did. So step number 1 is getting your mentality right. It's extremely difficult to learn if you are not open to learning and if you're not open to making mistakes. So of course, a lot of the work of language learning and being a polyglot and everything is about the mental game. And there's quite a few books on, how to pick up good habits and stuff like that. And I'm going to link in the description below, what I think is a good one for that. But in general, it's important to realize that this is a habit that you need to build. And so a lot of the stuff that's going to go around it is about just making sure you're as prepared as possible. And so here's how that happens. First of all, you need to find your why. And this is something that I've also mentioned in other videos of mine, but in general, it is extremely important. I just want to be a polyglot is not a good enough idea because there's just not going to be enough juice to get you going. Language learning is not easy at times. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. It's just certainly a journey of ups and downs, and it certainly requires time more than anything. And so in order for you to be able to put in the time, you have to have a good why that is beyond becoming a polyglot. I've never seen anybody that's just like, I just want to be able to speak many languages. I think that'd be really cool. I've never seen somebody that is, just has that in their mind and just has that end goal in their mind become successful in language learning. So truly, if this is something that you want to do, you need to have a better why than I just want to be a polyglot. You have to connect with each and every language, at least some sort of connection to some degree. It doesn't have to be crazy passion, sometimes it can be for functional reasons, but it's just, there has to be some sort of reason and there has to be some sort of connection. And so at the end of the day, it's very important to kind of have that, and it's very important to be able to cultivate that and enjoy the process. So when you have the why, and when you kind of figure out why you want to do this beyond just, I think it'd be really cool to amuse people at a party, it's really important to kind of connect with each language, and then it's really important to enjoy the process, because enjoying the process is what's going to make it happen for you, because becoming a polyglot will probably take years, and so enjoying the process is huge. When I mentioned in the beginning, like when I said like super quickly, I'm gonna tell you I never intended to become one. The reason I became one, I think, is because I was just enjoying the languages that I was learning and having so much fun along the way. I don't have a magic number in my head that I'm gonna reach. I'm gonna be like, that's it, I'm not gonna learn any more languages. For me, it's not about the numbers now that I'm a polyglot. Before, you know, that I was like bilingual and stuff. It wasn't about becoming a polyglot. That never even crossed my mind. It was all about, I was enjoying the process. I'm not saying that there's something wrong with having goals or with having set milestones. There's nothing wrong, but if enjoying the process is missing, then honestly, I've never seen somebody become a polyglot that way. Perhaps it's, who knows, might be possible in an alternate reality somewhere, but honestly, I don't think it's possible. So if you don't find a way to enjoy it, so find a way to enjoy it. Another aspect of the psychological game here, it's you have to accept some things. You have to accept some things that I would say not just myself, but every single polyglot I've talked to says that these things happen and you need to be prepared and you need to accept them. So here's what things I mean. Making mistakes. You're gonna make mistakes. I've made so many mistakes. As I said, the polyglots that I've talked to, you know, offline, or the polyglots that I've featured here on my channel in some of the conversations that I have with them. Everybody talks about the importance of this, and I'm sure that if you're somebody that watches videos on language learning, that you've heard this tip in other videos, and it's so important. And I really don't want to sound like a broken record, but at the end of the day, I would feel like I left out a huge piece if I didn't talk about this. So right from the get-go, accept that mistakes are gonna happen and you need to be super comfortable with them. And honestly, the more time you spend language learning, the easier it's gonna be to be accepting of mistakes. I am so comfortable with making mistakes at this point. I think learning languages kind of just made that happen for me. But you need to be prepared. You need to know it's gonna happen. You need to know it's gonna be okay when it happens. Same thing with mixing languages and interference. It's bound to happen. No one has found a way around it. Eventually languages get separated with practice, but there's gonna be times, even in your most fluent languages, when you're just gonna blank out and forget a word, or there's gonna be an interference from another language. Some languages love to interfere for some reason that I don't know. But honestly, sometimes languages that are not in the same family, in the same language group, interfere, and they just like to interfere in your head, and they don't like to interfere in your friend's head. This is also something you need to accept. You need to accept interference. You need to accept that you have no clue what languages are going to decide to mix together. Sometimes you can take an educated guess, sometimes they're gonna shock you. But interference is certainly something you're gonna need to get comfortable with, and it's not a big deal, and it happens to us all. Just trust me, it happens to each and every person that's studied multiple languages. Something else that's important is to get over the fear of speaking. I imagine you're gonna want to use your new language eventually, and so regardless of whether you are going to be speaking heavy or not in your practice, at some point you are going to have to speak, and so I think it's very important to get over that fear. This is something that can definitely be fixed. It's not just about language learning. Fear of speaking can happen in a language learning context. Also, for many people, it happens in a public speaking context. I was one of those people, you know, growing up at schools, never created public speaking. Now it is super easy for me. Just, you know, speak publicly, make presentations, obviously talk to the camera. This is something that I never thought I could do before, but really it's about practice. You know, if I can go from a person that just did not do public speaking to somebody that is now so comfortable and I can do it in front of any crowd and not flinch, this happens with practice only. That's like, truly, when it comes to fear of speaking, be it public speaking or speaking a new language, I think they're so related. That's why I gave my public speaking example. But yeah, when it comes to that fear, it's so easy to get over it when it comes to practice, right? It's not easy in terms of like what you're feeling inside. The first time, maybe it's awful, but it gets easier each and every time. And then you reach a point where you have zero fear. So really there's no antidote here but practice. But if you practice just getting out there, it's going to help. And if you're also somebody that's gotten over a fear of public speaking, then you know it's certainly possible. So you can do it again in speaking a new language. It's certainly doable, trust me. And last but not least, also something else that I really want to cover in this video, if you feel like so many of those psychological points are difficult for you because you have a lot of limiting beliefs, for example, you're not sure you can learn a language, you're not sure you can be a polyglot, you're scared to speak, etc. You know, pick your poison. Whatever it is, whatever the case, if you're struggling to kind of change those thought patterns and you're finding that aspect of the game difficult, then I'm gonna pop a video on the screen talking about the alter ego effect, because I feel like if you use an alter ego as a method in language learning, it can be really useful, and I did a whole video explaining how you can utilize that if you're struggling with the psychological aspect of language learning. Alright, so once that you have your head on right, then what are the steps you need to take when you want to become a polyglot? This is actually a crucial part of the video that I really want to address. And in addition to this video, there's actually quite a few videos that you can watch next, I think, that will help you become a polyglot, because this is kind of like the master video, the one that I'm doing right now, right? How to become a polyglot. But then there's different ones that delve into specific topics that I discuss in this video. So it can kind of be like a mini course. And I'm gonna link everything in the description, like the order in which I recommend you watch some of my other videos that I've previously done that you can watch after this one, and you can kind of have a better step-by-step process. But this one is going to be the summary, the skeleton video, and then the details I'm going to link again, as I said, as a sequence in the description of the video, so that you can follow them and really make the most of this. And now let's dive into steps. So steps in terms of like what exactly to do once you have your head on right, and once you followed all of those, you know, all of the psychological work of accepting mistakes, accepting all of that. So here's what I think. A lot of the advice out there on becoming a polyglot is about focus on one language at a time. If you've come across my previous videos, then if you know this is not the first video that you see of me, then you know that I actually truly disagree with that. I don't think that there's anything wrong with learning multiple languages at the same time. I think it's a wonderful idea, but it's not like I'm saying everybody should do this, you know. So for me, step number one, if you want to become a polyglot, is figure this out. Figure it out, figure out what works for you in terms of studying multiple languages at the same time or not. Make an experiment, why not? There's nothing wrong with making mistakes. I used all of the wrong methods back in the day when I was in school and I didn't know anything about language learning methods, and I just kept experimenting and finding what works for me. So here's what I think you should do. If there's obviously some of you that are gonna work best with, you know, one language after another, and you don't want to mix, that's fine. Sometimes learning several at the same time, it can mean learning them faster. I actually don't think that one after the other is the fastest way. For some people it can be. For me, I am so much faster when I learn several languages at the same time. They help each other out and the magic happens. Again, linking a video that I've made on that topic about how magical truly it can be when you learn several at the same time. But you want to find out what type of person you are and what preferences you have and whether you should learn several at the same time or not. So for me, advice number one is not learn it one after the other. Advice number one is figure out whether you want to learn several languages at the same time or not. And you can watch the 2 videos that I made on the topic to figure that out, so that you know what my reasoning is, first of all, why I say this, why I say learning several is amazing. But then there's work for you where it's like you have to figure out what works. And in order to figure out what works, don't be afraid to try, you know, one after the other, try several at the same time, see what you think is better. Don't be afraid to have those experiments, which leads me to my next point. When it comes to learning languages, you should never get married to your routine. You should experiment with different methods, but always feel free to adapt and change. At this point, I've kind of narrowed down my routine so well. Like, I know what works for me, I know what methods work, etc. Even now, I will make tweaks here and there. I never get married to a routine. I constantly add new things, I discard things. It's like always having that flexibility is really important in language learning. If you feel like something doesn't work, get rid of it. If you want to try something new, try it, see if it works, whether you should incorporate it long term or not. At the end of the day, you should find the best method that works for you. Now, I suggest that you research some methods. I have so many tips and advice on this channel on different topics, you know, how do you read, what do you do with grammar, etc. It's like so many different tips and tricks of what I think are good methods to learn languages. You can certainly watch that. You can watch other polyglots. I think in general, It's wonderful to see people who've done this before and like see what they have to say. I do this on so many topics in so many areas of my life. It's always good to get new ideas. So get ideas from me, from people like me here on YouTube, from your friends that you know that speak many languages. Get as many ideas as possible and try out as many different methods as possible. But then, of course, there needs to be that aspect of what works best for you. You should ultimately listen to yourself. If you try all of my advice and you're like, okay, that didn't work for me, then it didn't work for you. That's fine. You keep looking for new methods. But that being said, I feel like there's some things that we all agree are good, like comprehensible input, like works so well. Finding ways to enjoy language learning and only doing enjoyable activities, that is wonderful. Spending more time with the language itself rather than, you know, talking about it and its grammar points, that is also something that is universally kind of, many of us think that, let's not say universally, let's say like many of us actually think that that's, and have seen, you know, that that's super useful. So of course there are some things that are gonna work for 99% of people, and so it kind of feels like they're law. Maybe you're the 1% for whom those things don't work. So that's why I say flexibility is super important. At the end of the day, when you've decided whether you should study one after the other, you know, what methods you should use when you've experimented, stick to what works for you and just keep doing that until it no longer works, and then you change it again, because yeah, things can happen, things can change, your life circumstances can change, which prompts you into different methods. So that's fine. Just don't be married to your routine. And, you know, don't forget that, you know, in order to make a very long journey, you need to kind of take a few steps first, right? You need to, the journey of 1,000 steps, what starts with a couple, right? Was that what the quote was? I'm gonna pop it on the screen now, that's later when I'm doing the editing, because I can't really remember exactly what it was, but it's true. So whether, you know, whatever you choose to do, if you want to become a polyglot in the future, it really starts by learning just one more language. So pick the one that you're most passionate about and start with that one, and then you can add on new ones, or pick a couple that you're super passionate about if you want to do multiple. Another super important point is to decide when to stop. This is something that all polyglots should have in mind, and we all have different ideas of this. What do I mean? I mean, when do you kind of finish a language, right? What level are you gonna reach when you tell yourself, that's it, I'm gonna wrap up this language? This is super important, and it's something that I suggest you figure out in the beginning, or maybe it can change. Of course, your decision can change later. You can be like, I've learned them up until this level until now, but then now I want to learn them up until a different level. That's fine. You can change, but it's good to have that set as a goal in the beginning. So for me, what I personally do is I reach the advanced level. I'm not that person that kind of has this pursuit for perfection, because we're never perfect in a language. We are always improving, even in our native languages. There's still words I don't know in my native language, you know, some dialect words, etc. So it's important to know when to stop. And for me, I feel like the advanced level is a great point to stop. I don't need to be native-like, I just like to stop when I'm fluent. So when I'm fluent, it means I can talk comfortably about most topics in this language. I don't need to be native-like in terms of I know the things and, you know, the cultural undertones and everything. It's like, okay, I've reached fluency, and that's when I stop. I know people that want to be native-like. Obviously, that's a lot of work. You know, between native-like and fluent, there's like so much work. And so they're gonna spend much more time perfecting those languages, being, you know, making sure they can even write poetry in that language, which that's usually not my goal. As I say, fluency in most topics is usually my goal. There's a lot of polyglots, I think, that also just want to talk to people and want to connect with people when they're traveling, for example, and so they have this much more basic level of the language. So they will stop when they're like advanced beginners or intermediate, and kind of that's when they drop their languages. But of course, that means that they have the opportunity to learn more languages, you know, 30, 50, whatever. So there's going to be a trade-off between how deep you go in the languages you learn and how many you learn. So for you, it can be, again, just kind of having this kind of sort of a basic conversation level that some people go for. You can have that, you know, wanting to be native-like in every single language, and then you can have many things in between. As I said, personally, for me, it's fluency. For you, it can be something else, but you should be super clear on when you kind of want to stop learning a language, because then that's, of course, that's how you know when you can kind of drop it and pick up a next one. When we're talking about being a polyglot, you know that there's this thing to be said about maintaining languages. Maintaining is something that I think there's two kinds of people. Of course, not 100% sure, but from what I've noticed from other polyglots. So from my own observations, again, I didn't do a study on this or anything, just from speaking with people, what I've noticed is that usually there's two types of people. Many people are of the type that they need to actively maintain their languages or else they lose them. And then there's also some people such as myself. For me, it's like I don't lose them if I have an intermediate level or above. So I will lose it if I haven't formed a good language core yet. If I haven't formed those basics of the language, I'm gonna lose it. If I've only ever been a beginner, yeah, I lose it as well. But if I've reached the intermediate level, then I know I don't need to maintain that language, and I can come back to it and make it advanced whenever I want to, or if it's already advanced, you know, obviously it stays advanced. But yeah, once I reach the intermediate level, I don't have to worry. I think, like, I don't know if there's a third type that doesn't even forget their beginner level before they form a language core. I've never met a person like that, so I'm not sure if they exist, but those are usually the type of people that I think most people are. And so here's what I think you should do. I really think that you should figure out, if you want to, of course, but it could be super helpful to figure out what kind of person you are. Allow yourself to lose a language. It's gonna be fine. So what I've heard from people that actually, you know, they are prone to forgetting their languages, they're prone to lose them if they don't practice them. What I know from these people is that usually when they go back to that language, they have this super easy time to pick it back up, but much faster than the first time. So if you want to really know whether you should maintain or you can just kind of not worry about it, then you can afford to lose a language and then relearn it again, because second time around is going to be that much easier. And you could be like, okay, well, Stefani, you just said you're not that person. Yes, I'm not, but I do speak to a lot of people like that. So I feel like, you know, there's something to learn from them as well. And this is why I wanted to mention this tip in this video, so that I can help you if you are feeling like you might be prone to dropping languages. But if you're prone to dropping a language, if you find out that you're that person that if you don't practice, you're gonna lose it, even if you were advanced once. So if your trial and error reveals that to you, then what I think is super easy to do is to simply incorporate more of the language into your daily life. Make sure you're chatting with people once a month or something. Make sure when you want to read a new book, you kind of read it in a language you speak so you don't forget it. That you listen to music, that you watch movies, whatever. Maintaining is super easy. Even if you're prone to forgetting, you can always just kind of read the news in your target language once a week. And you kind of maintain it, and then you listen to music in another language, and then you kind of watch movies in a third, and so you can maintain it that way, and it's super easy. But don't worry, even if you forget it, I promise you, everybody says that you can get back to it. And if you find that you're like me, and once you reach the intermediate level, you kind of don't really forget it anymore, then good for you. That means that you should only worry about forgetting the language and being super consistent in the beginning, and then once you're at the intermediate level, you can kind of drop it and go back to it whenever you want to, and that's gonna work for you. I try to cover quite a few topics in this video. As I promised, I'm gonna make a detailed guide so that after you have this skeleton video, you can go ahead and add some meat to the bones on different topics, and you can follow it in that order that I list below, and kind of get this full picture of tips and tricks on how to learn a new language in 2023, how to become polyglot. And I think that this is going to be a very exciting journey for you if you decide to undertake it again. You don't have to, but if you want to, then I got you. Comment down below with any questions that you have, and please like and subscribe, of course, because that truly helps my channel. It truly helps me as a creator to keep making these videos for you, and I really hope that this was useful. Let me know if anything was unclear. I would love to help, and I'll see you here again next Wednesday, and have a wonderful new year. I wish you all the best and that you may achieve all of the goals that you set for yourself. See you soon.